right, welcome to Checkpoint. The hashtag on social media is Checkpoint, on Facebook at Yvonne Aquara, on Twitter at Yvonne Aquara, at KTN News, or on SMS. The number is 22155. On this date in 2008, that peace accord was signed. How far have we come? What are some of those key tenets of Agenda 4? And, how far have we come with that regard? The constitutional bodies, the Constitution itself. Let me introduce you to my panel today. We have Daisy Amdani, who's the chair of the National Women's Steering Committee. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
We also have Peter Kariuki, who's an advisor on governance in the Office of the President. And then we have Dr. Ekuru Aukot, whom you all remember was the birther of this constitution, if you like, was the chair of the committee of experts that drew up the constitution. He's now the team leader of Third Way. All right, so I'd like to start Third Way Alliance. Excuse me, Dr. The Third Way Alliance.
It's the era of alliances.
All right, I'd like to start, at the heart of the matter, and I'd like to start with you, Peter. This administration was the one that was sort of tasked with the challenge of implementing quite a number of issues in that constitution. How do you think, that process has gone so far?
Yvonne, allow me to begin by saying that Agenda 4 has been implemented by more than one administration. Mm-hmm. And so this administration is a follow-through of the work that began from 2008 moving forward. Mm-hmm. But certainly this administration has had the very interesting task, I must say, to be the ones who are implementing the reforms and the agenda envisaged on the Agenda 4 with a new constitution after the elections of 2013.
Right.
And so it has been an interesting journey. I must say that we have covered some ground, perhaps not as much as we think we should have by now, but certainly there are encouraging signs in terms of some of the things we've been able to achieve, and we'll be able to articulate, I think, a bit more.
Could you be, a little more specific? Just give us a few examples. Yeah.
If you look at Agenda 4, if I take land as one of the very sticky issues, mm-hmm. Tenure, security of tenure was one of the big issues that has been a problem in this country. This administration set out to say we are going to issue titles, for example. And we had a target of 3 million titles by 2017. I'm happy to say we are already now beyond 2, as far as 2-point-something million as we speak, and we shall actually be able to overshoot our target by 2017. We began to talk about reforms in the land sector. For example, how do we deal with administration of land matters, our registries? As we speak now, we have a new National Bulk Titling Center. It is fully ready to deal with automated and digitized titling. We now have been able to digitize 13 of the under 30 registries in this country, and I think in the next 9 months or so we should be able to digitize every single registry in the Republic.
Okay, very
and
quickly,
that is a big step, for example, in the land sector, among other things.
All right. I was going to ask about the challenges, but you can chip in.
Yeah, I think first of all, it's yes, this administration can claim to have implemented so much, and I'm happy that he's mentioning the issue of land. But to be frank with you, I think this administration has been so disappointing in the handling of land matters. First of all, we know that they have really undermined the National Land Commission. On the issue of issuance of title that my colleague talks about, this is not even a function of the executive. In fact, if you look at Article 67 that creates the National Land Commission, what the executive has done since they took over is to actually frustrate matters land, especially the workings, the independence of the National Land Commission. It's one of the transgressions I've seen of this administration. As a matter of fact, I tend to conclude that if there is number one enemy of the Constitution of the Republic of Kenya, is actually this administration. Why? Probably because, one, you have a duo that never even believed in this Constitution in the first place, that Kenyans actually gave the opportunity to lead this country. I think for me that's mistake number one that Kenyans actually made. So on questions of matters of land, this is already individuals, either from their family pedigree, political pedigree, whose names actually decorate any matters to do with land, either land grabbing, land ownership, whatever the case may be. So I do not think, and of course their conduct over time has demonstrated that they are not really able to handle those matters land. And that's why they're interfering with the National Land Commission.
Okay,
allow me to interject there, please, if I may.
Please.
Ekuru is talking about that this administration has frustrated the National Land Commission. An interesting point. It is interesting that the highest court in this land has ruled on the subject matter of whose responsibility it is to issue and deal with titles. And it has correctly said it is the Ministry of Lands. Now, Ekuru obviously wants to subscribe to a law not in the Republic of Kenya. This is the law, that is the Supreme Court of the Republic ruled on the constitutional question. It was actually a matter, an advisory opinion sought on the Constitution, brought before the Supreme Court, and it's already ruled.
Okay, all right.
I hope we'll get time to talk about the Supreme Court.
All right.
So that we know whether even the decision the Supreme Court makes is one that is actually constitutional or not.
Okay.
We can talk about this.
All right, let's have Daisy, and I think she's feeling a little left out in the cold.
Yeah,
Where do you think, you know, how far we've come with Agenda 4? Peter rightly puts it that, you know, the previous Grand Coalition administration and this one both playing a role in this. How would you assess that?
I think that the current administration has not successfully transitioned this country to the place that we ought to be. And I think that is primarily because of the kind of politics that is played in this country, and that the leadership of this country has actually failed in giving leadership to the constitutional process and the transitional process envisioned within the Constitution. Instead, we find that all means have been employed to actually consolidate power and play the kind of politics that actually brought us to the place where we were when we faced the, you know, where that brought us to the agenda 4 items. I mean, the issues that brought us to the Agenda 4 table. And I think that that is something that we must talk about, because the kind of leadership that has been displayed. I mean, I know that Peter talks about the strides that have been made in terms of the legislation and all, but we have seen, as Ekuru says, clear frustration.
Okay, could you speak to some of those clear frustrations? And I'd like to preempt the one that I know you're specifically passionate about, which is the 2/3 gender rule.
Yes, of course, the 2/3 gender rule. You know, I think one of the things that we need to understand is that the Constitution envisions a country. When we look at the preamble of the Constitution, it talks about recognizing that Kenyans want a more equitable society, one that is based on democracy, sharing, equity, and the rule of law. And of course, the rule of law implies that we're not working with the will of a person. This person subscribes to the rule of law as enshrined within the Constitution. What we saw is, when Jubilee actually came into office, because Jubilee are the first administration elected under the new Constitution, when they came into office, there were some very positive moves that they made, showing that they actually intended to honor the basic principles within the Constitution. And I think that the president made sure that every appointment that he made enshrined the 2/3 principle. He made sure that he did this. But we find that with the passage of time and the politics and trying to consolidate that power, he has continually moved away from the basic constitutional principles, particularly on the 2/3. And when you look at the current cabinet as it is constituted, it does not meet the 2/3 principle.
Peter?
And you know, I mean, we raised this issue. We wrote to Parliament about the list before they even vetted the nominees, and of course it was ignored. We've taken the matter to court, and we are hoping that the courts will actually rule in this matter.
Okay, Peter, that's an interesting one. The president has a cabinet that is not constituted according to the 2/3 gender rule.
The question one would ask is the cabinet fully constituted?
That is irrelevant.
What is he waiting for?
As currently constituted.
In the sense I'm saying is that indeed Daisy raises a good point. However, the president, being conscious of that point, is still organizing his government as we speak now. As a matter of fact.
Okay, let me say this.
So, if we hit the ceiling and say, look, this is it, there's no room for anything more, and we are not subscribed to that rule, then maybe
So
we
when
can say...
can we expect that, Peter?
Can I say this? Can I say this?
The fact is, we are not, he's not at the top. And that's the truth. And I think Daisy will agree with me.
No, I will not agree with you. And let me tell you why. Because the Constitution envisions that we shall have a cabinet of not less than 14 and up to 22.
Yeah.
Okay? Right now, we have a cabinet of 20. Okay? Now, the cabinet, as enshrined in the Constitution, and I will read for you just to be sure,
Yes,
just
ma'am.
to be clear. The cabinet consists of the president, the deputy president, attorney general, and not fewer than 14 and not more than 22 cabinet secretaries. So, when you put together the number that is right now, we have 20 cabinet secretaries, plus the president, the deputy president, and the AG. We have a cabinet of 23. At a minimum, we need to have 8 women. Even if the president was to expand the cabinet to the full number of 22
22.
and make them all women, it would still be unconstitutional. You would not have the numbers.
Because the president and the deputy president.
Because the deputy president, the president, and the
Yeah.
AG are all men, and they make up the cabinet. So it's a cabinet in its totality. So when you look at the numbers, it doesn't meet muster.
So is-
even if he were to expand the cabinet by those extra 2 numbers, it would still be unconstitutional.
Peter, would you like
and
to
for me,
respond?
you cannot tell me that the president has not fully constituted cabinet, because even in its half constitution, because before we had how many cabinet secretaries? 20, I think.
No,
20.
less. There were
Okay.
18, I think.
But he made sure that he abode by that principle. So even now, because we know that the cabinet was constituted with the ethnic communities that are being targeted for 2017. So in essence, what the president has done by his appointment is to actually show that the women's constituency is not a valuable constituency politically for him. And so it is expendable. It's
All
an
right.
expendable constituency.
I'd like
Not
Peter
only
to
that,
respond.
no, I also want to remind him about the Jubilee Administration Manifesto.
Okay.
Page 30 of Jubilee's manifesto, under the Usawa pillar, the president makes a promise and a commitment to the women of Kenya, and actually states that women are tired of empty promises, and as Jubilee, they will ensure
All right.
that they meet this threshold
I would like
in all
Peter to come in
appointments,
now.
including
Daisy?
the mechanism to implement the 2/3.
And I would like to come.
Daisy, let's have
Okay.
Peter respond to that.
She raises very
Yes.
good points. And one thing is this, perhaps it's expected that I will completely refuse or refute everything she has said. Women are an important constituency in this republic.
No, we are.
But not,
And
not,
I-
enough,
but not
enough to
for
be appointed.
Jubilee.
Guru, wait a minute.
Let's let him finish.
And in fact, the president himself has spoken on that issue. I would even charge you to show when he has not recognized that matter. In this particular issue, I think, and you raise an interesting point in terms of cabinet, right? The cabinet secretaries, and indeed, you're right, the president and the deputy president are part of cabinet. That is true. However, the appointive positions themselves are not fully complete.
Okay.
And we ourselves have advised the president, and he is privy to that issue, and he has considered it, and certainly you will see that reconfiguration even as we move along. Another important point, even if I may make, in terms of
Please,
political
very quickly,
issues,
because I'd like us to move forward.
women are an important constituency. And it's not just a political question. Women deserve a place in around the table.
And
on
they're going
every
to.
issue.
Are you giving us the assurance today
Certainly
that that
so.
will happen?
Certainly so.
Can you give us a time frame?
In fact, let me you see an interesting point.
Yeah.
I may even raise.
Okay.
Only recently there was a lot of discussions around the country about person A, person B, who seem to be very powerful. The thing is, I can tell you for a fact, we take the issue of women serious. And in fact, if you look at the development side of it, one of the key areas has been, how do you ensure women, youth, and persons with disability are not just periphery, but are having
Can I please
an
come in very
opportunity
briefly?
to work and
All right.
have a place around the conversations.
Okay. Peter.
Yvonne, I think let's stop lying to Kenyans. It's not enough to put in many flowery words that you care about women. I think what's important is to demonstrate that you actually care. You cannot tell us, today is February the 28th, for heaven's sake, karaoke.
Yes, it is.
And you cannot tell us that the president is still configuring his cabinet to take care of women 1 year before the next election. Unless, of course, the women of this country want to continue to be flower girls in being dangled politically. And I think, Daisy, my advice to you is this. Instead of fighting for the 1/3 gender rule, you should now fight for the 2/3. Why can't we change the equation?
Okay.
Why is it always women? Why are women always the third?
All right. So I'd like
why
to
not the 2/3?
Yes, but I'd like to.
And I think we need to take that debate further.
All right.
Yeah,
That's
absolutely.
perhaps we can also talk about.
But also, wait a minute. But
Time.
also, in terms of the national executive,
Yes.
there is one article that the president completely violated.
Okay.
Article 130 of the Constitution clearly demands of the president to put the national face of Kenya into the cabinet.
Right.
Besides the women issue, what he has done, he has concentrated 2 tribes in the cabinet. It's actually a violation of Article 130. It talks about the diversity of the people, the ethnic diversity of the people
All right.
of Kenya.
I'd like to
that is
remove
a
this.
violation.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I'd like to move this a little bit away from the executive and the presidency because, Daisy, like you rightly put it, when this went to Parliament for vetting, you know, the Parliament isn't just constituted of Jubilee members of Parliament. There is also members of opposition. Who would then play a role in saying to the president, we will not take these names, we want to make sure that they meet the constitutional requirement. Do you think they played that role, which is well within their purview, very well?
I think only 2 members of parliament raised the issue, Honorable Ken Okoth and Millie Odhiambo.
Right.
Having said that, I think that the 11th parliament is a huge disappointment, not only on the 2/3 issue, because of course they have failed even to implement a mechanism according to the Supreme Court advisory opinion. You have seen the way we have gone round in circles. I mean, members of parliament have come up with anything other than a mechanism to come up to implement the 2/3. They've come up with other initiatives aimed at removing the 2/3 principle. Of course, they have even aided the executive, which you remember the last order of business in December was the miscellaneous amendments. One among them was the removal of the requirement of the 2/3 for the police service and for the judicial service commission. So even when you look at parliament, when you look at the way the parliament has behaved, the parliament have also worked towards ensuring that we do not meet the 2/3 principle. But not just that, even in terms of its oversight role on several others. I mean, you look at when the security laws were passed, you look at the kind of legislation, how many pieces of legislation that have been passed in parliament that have been challenged in the court because they violate the constitution on, on several clauses. So you've got to ask yourself also, what is parliament doing? And I think the 11th parliament, in terms of violating the constitution and working together with the executive to actually subvert the constitution and not even meet the timelines that we have in terms of the implementation schedule. You know, I think that in itself is a problem. So working in concert with the executive, they're taking this country in a different direction.
I think what Daisy is saying is that if you look at the totality of all these aspects, it's really the failure of leadership in Kenya at both levels. You have a parliament that is captive to the executive, and that's why you hear of tyranny of numbers. And basically tyranny of numbers means that they cannot think on their own. They cannot think in terms of representation of the issues that concern Kenyans. So for me, what is really the crux of the matter is that the failure of leadership and stewardship in this country. And precisely for that reason, Kenyans, when we were writing the constitution, demanded a type and character of a leader that is responsive to the issues such as gender.
Do you think, is the Jubilee administration responsive to those?
Not at all. In fact, for me, on a scale of
the point is,
let's hear from Peter for
Yvonne, and I think if you take up from what Ekuru is saying, he's saying parliament. Parliament.
Right.
Not Jubilee parliament.
But let me correct you.
1 minute. Wait a minute. Because none of us here can speak on behalf of parliament.
That's true.
That's true.
But we can also see what they're doing.
That is true. And I think
we can also see that Justin Muturi confirmed
one moment,
that actually this is a jubilee.
1 minute.
He confirmed.
Daisy has raised a very, very pertinent points, I think, in terms of things which our parliament can do and should do.
Yes.
And I think we can hold that parliament to account. And it is the totality of the institution. But the point I want to raise about the issue of laws and their challenge in courts and so on and so forth. Constitutionalism is not a mechanical thing. It is always going to be, till kingdom come, we are going to have laws questioned, executive actions questioned, judicial itself questioned, because that is exactly what we envisage for ourselves as a republic. That we shall continue to perfect our democracy. I think that is exactly what it is.
Point to mention, just as we're, as you've mentioned, questioning decisions, constitutionality, and we've talked about the responsibility of Parliament, but then there's also some of the events that have happened around the presidency, and I know we had the previous guest and we talked a little bit about that, but there's a sense in which people think the president does not uphold the constitution, he does not respect the rule of law. I will remind you, with the 10,000 police recruits, he went ahead and ordered them to report to Kiganjo against a court order. I will remind you also of a ship that was blown up.
The appointment of judges.
Okay.
I mean, I can list, honestly, before I came here,
so
I started listing about 18 transgressions that this Jubilee and this particular president has actually committed against the Constitution.
All right, including the one recently with the Tunoi Tribunal and the flip-flopping on that. Would you like to respond to the president?
Before he responds, I want to correct this. The problem in Kenya has never been about constitutionality. It's been about constitutionalism. The culture to enforce laws. That is the crux of the matter. It's not about constitutionality. We have a lot of constitutional laws being made every day by lackluster parliament, like the 11th parliament we have. The question is about whether we can actually live the spirit and letter of those.
Let's let Peter respond to that. Thank you.
We followed, of course, the discussion earlier before we came in, and so I don't think I want to go too much into the issue about whether, you've asked me about the Tunoi case, for example. I think in that instance, the point is the public encountered a conversation between the executive and the Judicial Service Commission. That is what they encountered. That, within the bounds of what was required in terms of tribunal, it was formed, right? And so the issue of, and I didn't want to start going to the particulars, but in that particular instance, and I would encourage us to be a bit more diligent. That particular communication, I know the one you're referring to, that has been the subject matter of discussions, said, I propose, or we propose the following. What is a proposal? Obviously, it means there's a conversation going on. And obviously, after that proposal was made, a conversation happened. And the president then took the decision, said, fine, we hear you, then this is a tribunal form.
I think that let me jump in right there. And I actually do not envy Kariuki, because he is in an enviable position, having to defend things that actually cannot be defended.
Exactly.
I think that it's important that the president understands who he is. Right? He is the head of state, and he cannot afford to flip-flop on matters constitutional, like the issues that have been raised. Particularly, when we talk about the violation of court orders, like the instance with the police recruits, you remember his speech. In his speech, what he said, I am ordering them to report to Kiganjo, and I will take personal responsibility, which means that a discussion had been had by his advisors, obviously, where he was told, hey, you know what, you can do this in a security situation, which goes back to the issue of the rule of law. The president must understand, number one, he does not rule by fiat. He does not rule by the will of an individual. He must rule within the confines of the law and the constitution, which gives him the powers to hold the office that he holds. That is number one. Number two, the president cannot be seen to not know what he's doing, you know. That's why he has advisors. It makes the president look bad when statements are issued by the office of the president or by the chief of staff of the president, and then he goes back on the word, and you know, it looks like the president is not on the ball.
Yvonne, there's no statement was issued. Let's be clear about this.
Okay, all right.
There's no statement issued. This is a letter, a communication from the chief of staff to the chair.
But in that letter, the chief
JC
of staff
made a proposal, right?
which many say was not constitutional because the president did not have any leeway within the constitution.
It wasn't a proposal, Yvonne.
It wasn't.
It wasn't
It was
a proposal. The letter was with some finality.
It did have
that we cannot appoint a tribunal because, and this is the mediocrity of the whole thing, that because Justice Tunoi is fighting another case in the Court of Appeal about his age. Totally unrelated issues. And in fact, let me correct you. Let me correct Peter. Let me correct Peter.
To go into this
no, we will go into it. Because it's important.
I wish we could produce it here.
Hold on a second.
And the last paragraph of
can I explain something?
Is a proposal.
First of all, let's not mislead Kenyans that this language you're using, calling there was a conversation between the public and whoever. No. The Constitution at Article 168, Clause 5 is absolutely clear that once JSC concludes of a matter and finds a judge incompetent or whatever the case may be, the president shall, that is the language the Constitution says, shall. But you know, the president even, apart from flip-flopping on that issue, he even made another mistake. He appointed somebody who is not even qualified to be a judge.
And we have been told.
And we have been told.
That has already been canvassed.
But Yvonne, you know, the matter here is this. The matter here is this, you know, that the president cannot be seen to not be knowing what he's doing.
All right, and I think that point is well made.
Despite advisors like Peter being by his side.
Okay.
The only saving grace I can say is, you know, that advice doesn't have to be taken. So we will assume that the advice is well.
It is good to have the benefit of doubt, however.
So is that the case? Are you giving
We'll assume that the advice is him well.
What is it? Do you plead the fifth? Is it the fifth?
All right, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like us to finish our conversation on constitutionality, where we are, and moving ourselves forward. And I'll give each of you a minute to just summarize where you think we are and where we need to go. I'm told it's even 30 seconds. So I'll start with you if you can be really fast. Where are we? Where do we need to go?
I think, one, the spirit and letter of this constitution has not been implemented. Certainly not by this administration, because in my honest opinion, they don't believe in it in the first instance. They swore to defend a constitution that clearly from their conduct and character and the way they do it, they are actually violating it every day. So we are doing very badly in terms of implementing the constitution. My saving grace is this: at least they have not attempted to amend this constitution. They have tried to undermine it through legislation, through policy pronouncement, and the rest. The constitution is still intact. For me, what Kenya needs going forward is a complete change and overhaul of leadership in this country. This current administration and even the opposition, for me, they are not an option for Kenya going forward in terms of saving this constitution.
All right, I'll be a little political. Are you the solution for that? Are you running for president?
Third Way Alliance will definitely present a different narrative for Kenya.
Will you be running for president?
That I will confirm with
your supporters. Let's have Daisy very quickly.
I think that it's not too late. I think that the president still can save his face. I think that there remains a lot that needs to be done. First and foremost, the president needs to show us that he is committed to upholding the constitution, and he needs to implement the two-thirds and lead from the front. We need to see the political will towards the rule of law and the basic constitutional principles. And I think that Kenya is headed, right now we are not headed in the right direction, but the president actually does hold the key towards reining in this country. He needs to deal with corruption very beyond the words, you know, and we need to move. He needs to stop the talk and walk that talk. He's given us enough platitudes. We want to actually see action, particularly on the two-thirds.
Okay, Peter has taken a bit of a beating over the last few weeks over how he seems to be handling matters. Assurances to Kenyans tonight?
Including admitting that we are stealing from each other.
I think you may agree on that. Very quickly, Yvonne, I would not agree with some elements of what my two colleagues have said, and some I do agree with them. The point is to perfect our democracy. And I'd like to emphasize this. It is not going to be a 5-year, a 10-year job. The contestations we see in our society are about us, and about us pursuing our destiny. And these are not just empty words. I am confident that there are people like myself, like Ekuru, like Daisy here. We are Kenyans. Unless we are saying we are ourselves are not willing and able to reach these things, I can confirm we are, and I am sure this administration will deliver.
I wish they could even deal with post-election violence first before. Then we can believe that actually they can deliver.
Dr. Ekuru Aukot, who's from the Third Way Alliance team leader. We also have Peter Kariuki, who's the President's advisor on governance, as well as Daisy Amdani, who's from the National Women's Steering Committee. Thank you all for your time tonight.
Thank you.
And I will be taking a look at your feedback in just a short while. You're watching Checkpoint.
You should give us 3.